Hi, I'm Kaloa Lauber, and I am going to be presenting my timeline activity using Timeline JS. I actually followed a great deal of the information given in the readings. Basically, one of the things I touched base on was that history is not linear, but things do happen in sequence. And I actually tried to find something that would fit in with my advanced placement classes that would be not only a model for them for their own timeline activity, but also something that they could use as an artifact for the synthesis unit. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I tried to use Kaltura, but that was not working for me. So I'm going to I've had to come here and go to what I know, which is um, Zoom and YouTube. So again, as I said, I use Timeline JS, and I had quite a bit of fun. It was very difficult for me at first to find images that suited my purposes. So I wanted to talk about that just a little bit. When I went to Google Images, everything that I checked was needed licensing. So what I did was I had lunch with my librarian friend, and she gave me some really good information. She told me that if you go to images, I'm going to just demonstrate here just so I can show you what I did. I'm just going to put Bugs Bunny. Don't ask, I love him. She said to go to tools, usage rights, Creative Common usages. So these will come up with more of a stock picture that you don't have to like make sure it's automatically fair use, but it was something that I did not know, so I just wanted to share that. I'm gonna go back to my timeline and start to describe what I have here. So the synthesis unit is where in AP you have to pull from different resources. It's usually resources of uh, between 7 and 8 artifacts. And in those artifacts, the students would have to actually choose three and determine an argument. So this one is my perspective of the effects of the pandemic on students and teachers. This project may be used as an artifact in the AP language and composition class. Students will be required to take a position on the effects of the pandemic on student learning and teacher retention. This will be paired with their synthesis unit on education. I kind of front loaded with that, but I did use the color wheel as described by our professor. I chose red next to Northside ISD because I am a teacher at Taft High School, and that is our predominant color. And I started with the beginning of the pandemic here in San Antonio when schools were closed March 19th, 2020. San Antonio schools closed due to the pandemic. Schools across the nation had to close down after the news of COVID-19 became more dire. And then distance learning becomes a necessity. Schools had already been working with Google Suite, but the pandemic caused officials to make it the mandatory mode of communication as students went online to continue their education. So here I have used the capture, and I did give credit to the artist. This is from a website. I'll click into it with an article. So students who I would share this with would be able to see more detail about the actual use of distance learning during the pandemic. Okay. The beginning of the Great Resignation. This is a YouTube video that I embedded. I'm going to let it play a little bit. So basically, students were sent back to school in during the height of the pandemic. Many veteran teachers chose to resign, having a void of experience. Teachers in the classroom
is now at the highest we've seen since the pandemic started. Metro Health is advising students learn at home after raising the risk level to the red zone last night. But the largest San Antonio school districts say they still plan to continue in-person instruction. Eyewitness News reporter Jordan Foster joins us live with more on what teachers have to say. Jordan?
Hey, Sharon. Well, overwhelmingly concern is how one union president described to me how they feel right now. We talked to many school districts today, including Northside ISD and Northeast ISD. They argue that they have the proper safety protocols in place and haven't seen any large outbreaks happening within the schools. But Alejandro Lopez, who's the president of the San Antonio Alliance of Teachers and Support Personnel, who also represents many San Antonio ISD employees, says it's what students and other personnel could be bringing into the school with them that concerns them. She says this next surge will be the first that many of these teachers have had to work through. During the last surge that happened this past summer, a lot of schools were closed. She says that there are many workers right now who fear for their safety and the safety of their families, and they feel trapped because they have no choice but to be in class teaching their students.
People are having to make really difficult decisions at the moment.
Okay, so the operative word here is a lot of teachers were resigning. The Great Resignation, which is when we lost a lot of our veteran teachers. A lot of people said it was overwhelming, and I would describe that to students so that they would understand that it wasn't just a learning gap problem for students; it was also the loss of great intellect that would be able to help in the experience. So, for me, as a teacher throughout and a veteran teacher, I had to find ways to engage students online. And one of the things I did was use outside resources to engage and educate remote students. I always like to integrate whatever I've done in my own life to help students to realize that when you choose a career, it doesn't mean that you're just stuck to that one mode of being, that you can use outside sources to actually become an expert on certain things. And so I had to get creative. As a U.S. Holocaust Museum Fellow, I was able to host a survivor for my students remotely and in a hybrid session. Many people were looking for ways to connect with education and students, and the U.S. Holocaust Museum is very proficient in that. So I wanted to share a little bit of this video with you all.
The third keywords and some of the same old stereotypes. Globalists or the bankers are, and then some will say something like, well, you know, the Jews are running the world. These are real stereotypes that people still believe today. I am an African American woman. I teach Latinx students at a school that's 91% Latinx. I have always been interested in the Holocaust because I think that the lessons should continue to be taught in the school. First of all, I had to give my students the definition of anti-Semitism.
In school, that's when I had learned that there was like an actual word for the meaning, like the
These
hate towards
students signed media
Communities may not
releases.
even have
And
maybe one or two
also,
Jewish
I
people,
want to
but
point
they're
out that
using
they have
the
graduated from high
language
school
that is pointed
since
toward
that time.
that
But they
community.
did sign
there's a
media
lot of
releases.
hatred in the world towards other religions and towards other people, and it escalates in a heartbeat, especially with like social media nowadays.
When my students come into the classroom and they're saying things that they've seen on YouTube or any social media, they come back and they have all of these statements and they don't know what it means, but it's really anti-Semitism in its most insidious form.
Certain terms I didn't realize were rooted in the Holocaust and hate.
So the one lesson for this, and also to help students to realize that teachers can reach outside of the classroom, it's kind of like the same thing where we had field trips when we were young, just allowing other resources to come in. I also want to point out I lost 30 pounds since that video, and it wasn't just all the hair. Okay, so then after being in online remotely exclusively, now I moved from California during the height of the pandemic, and they went on longer. But when I came to San Antonio, they had already lifted in classroom attendance. Not everyone came back to the classroom though. So you had the hybrid classroom, which led to more teachers leaving because of the fact that it was a lot for anyone, particularly if you're having to be stuck to the screen and then talk to a classroom and just be the master of many things and the conqueror of none. Teachers had to teach students who chose to come to school and also those who were online simultaneously. The same thing that was difficult for teachers was difficult for students who sat in the classroom and who had didn't have the same opportunities they had when it was regular school year. Not only our arts and sciences kids, but also just kids, the athletes and things like that, missed all those opportunities and all those social norms. So a lot of students came back with anxiety. A lot of students came back with depression, inability to react appropriately in difficult situations. And so basically, this speaks to what I would have my students doing, and I'm going to go to the actual chapters that I'm using for this unit, which is synthesis. My last slide is future high schoolers drop in readiness scores. You will notice that I have elementary and middle school because those are the kids that I ended up getting last year and the year before that. And they came in with huge gaps in learning for me for ELA, and I know math didn't fare even any better. And so we had to actually integrate things that students didn't learn because they were off their cameras. There was a lack of communication, and a lot of students had high truancy once they returned to school. And so this would prove that the pandemic had a severe effect on education, and we've been recovering ever since. And so that's my slideshow. I didn't know how many slides, but I knew that I had videos, so I wanted to make sure I was able to get everything in. And so I'm going to show you um, my unit, which is under education in the AP language and composition book. It starts out with the dumbest generation, and these are opinionated posts in which someone has to form an opinion. And then another article, the dumbest generation, don't be dumb. And then living and learning with new media, summary of findings from the Digital Youth Project. So there's several articles in here that are asking whether and this was before the pandemic, actually. This was asking about Google itself and that students are not having the resiliency to read and things like that. So I would actually have students to bring in some modern day examples from their own use of media. They can use my artifact that I'm showing to you right now, and they also can just use it as a model of how to do the timeline. And I can talk about the struggles that I had, including using the video to try to get this across to you all. Again, with the readings, I looked at the folk music reading a great deal. I do love Bob Dylan. I watched the movie, and I love all of those things. So I was looking at it sequentially and how music went from one to the other. My timeline, when we look at it, is basically spaced out, starting with 2020, and then just basically relating relationally to what was happening to teachers, like more social emotional as opposed to that linear feeling, why people were feeling the way that they were. And I think that's just because I'm definitely an arts and science teacher, and it's really interesting to me to have the dialogue more than it is to show dates and times. My name is Kaloa Lauber, and this is my presentation.